I don't care what you think. I care about journalism. Who are you working for? What is this absurdity?
And there's garbage on both sides. We need to get them out.
Why were they all covering up for a pedophile? How does that make any sense at all? The mainstream media is evil in their protection of genocide as long as Israel does it.
Those parents and their feelings, they don't matter because those Palestinians are subhuman, right? You racist, disgusting prick. Isaac Shore, who happens to be one of these writers over at a website known as Mediaite, and happens to think that every war crime committed by Israel is actually Hamas's fault, decided to attack both me and Cenk Uygur in a pretty pathetic attempt at a hit job. His first line of attack, Isaac Shore's first line of attack against me had to do with my appearance on Tucker Carlson's show. I'm going to have the conversations. I'm gonna have the conversations whenever I want, however I want, and no one is gonna tell me what I can and can't do. I don't care if you're on the left, I don't care if you're on the right, I don't care if you're my mother or father. I'm a 39-year-old woman who has operated in the context of news media for nearly 20 years, and I'm gonna have a conversation with whoever I damn well please. That's number one. Now, here's what he has to say about my appearance on Tucker Carlson's show recently. This was, I believe, last week. Anna Kasparian has demonstrated a willingness to pal around with the far right. Carlson recently released a nearly 2-hour denunciation of 2 Jewish American commentators, Ben Shapiro and Fox News's Mark Levin. What a dishonest prick Isaac Shore happens to be. Because here's the thing, when you don't actually have an argument, when you're unable to dismantle merited critique of a foreign country like Israel, well then all you do is smear, slander, misinterpret intentionally, right? Engage in ad hominem attacks. Pathetic. Make no mistake about it, for literally decades, Mark Levin has been a grotesque member of the media who has spewed all sorts of hatred. And the whole point of Tucker Carlson's hour-long monologue was to say to his audience, don't turn into this. Judge people as individuals, not as a group. We don't believe in blood guilt. I do not blame the entire Jewish population for the war crimes that are committed by the Israeli government, because I'm not an idiot. I can tell the difference between the two. And I judge people as individuals, not as an entire group. I don't believe in blood guilt. But that's not the case for Mark Levin. So let me give you a little taste of who he is and then ask yourselves, why is it that Isaac Shore didn't feel the need to even mention how hateful Mark Levin is? Why isn't he writing pieces about how hateful Mark Levin is? Instead, he attacks people like me and Tucker Carlson for finding Mark Levin to be a deplorable, disgusting, Islamophobic, hateful bigot. Take a look.
And I'm supposed to, what? Shed crocodile tears for what's going to happen to these people? I'm not. Israel has every right to throw every damn thing it has at barbarians. And if there are innocent people, quote unquote, civilians who are killed, then maybe they ought to organize to take out the government they elected.
I mean, Hamas, Palestinian civilian, what's the difference? Am I right? Do you think you could spare a word or two in your little piece, Isaac Shore, about the hateful commentary that Americans have been consuming from a grotesque pig like Mark Levin for years? No, you can't? Okay. Well, we know what's actually motivating you here. People like Shore, Isaac Shore, who respond to people like us who are deeply, deeply disgusted and bothered by the carnage that we've seen in Gaza. The way that he just immediately makes it about the emotions and the feelings of people who are safe, right? Oh, the criticism of Israel as they are committing these mass atrocities, that's not a big deal. But the way I personally feel about you commenting on it, that's more important.
100%, they do it all the time.
It's so selfish, so narcissistic and self-absorbed. It really is. And the deflection in immediately talking about like, oh, it's about my feelings, it's anti-Semitism, that's what it is. Let's talk about anti-Semitism. Let's not talk about all the children whose body parts their parents are picking up from the ground and putting into plastic bags in Gaza. Let's not talk about that. Those parents and their feelings, they don't matter because those Palestinians are subhuman, right? You racist, disgusting prick.
Look, guys, there's two giant problems with Larry Summers here. Number one, the emails are devastating. He's asking Epstein for how he can, quote unquote, get horizontal with a woman that he's mentoring at work. Jesus Christ, man. And then he talks about using his position of power and privilege. It's like out of a Me Too manual, right? And he's like, but she can't get that access to that stuff that I have and the things that she needs for her professional career unless she gives me the sex. Like, oh my God, right? And he's talking to Epstein about this, and Epstein's like, attaboy, don't let her get away with anything without giving you sex. This happened in 2019. Not only was Epstein arrested in 2008 already, but in 2018, Miami Herald broke a series of stories that made it absolutely indisputable that Epstein was a prolific pedophile. And both Plaskett and Summers past 2018, in the year 2019, are like, hey, Epstein, how you doing? Let me get some advice. Okay, so apparently they didn't mind at all. As long as the money keeps coming in and apparently the sex advice keeps coming in and whatever other projects they're working on together keep continuing, they didn't care at all. Now, to the point that Jordan's making, so not only does Larry Summers help destroy the housing market in the first place by deregulating the banks, the deregulating derivatives was the #1 cause of the crash. Number 2 wasn't even close. That was the principal reason. And Larry Summers did that. Then the corrupt Democrats bring Larry Summers back in the Obama administration. And what does he do? He lets all the bankers go. He says, oh yeah, the bankers, it's not their fault. He gives them a bailout and pays their bonuses. Pays their bonuses for destroying our economy and costing us 12 million jobs. Now the Democrats want to bring him back as the architect of the next Democratic administration? Oh, hell to the no. No way. So what that shows you is the Democratic establishment hasn't learned a single thing. They're just as corrupt and dirty as they have ever been. So do not trust anyone in the Democratic establishment. They do not have your best interests in mind. The minute they get elected, they're gonna do a switcheroo. And they're gonna bring Larry Summers and all the neoliberals that have destroyed our economy and helped corporations ravage our government. They're gonna bring them right back because they're paid by those guys. No, no way. Democratic primaries in 2028 is the most important election you will ever have in your lifetime. It's not even close. They cried wolf about all the other elections. In 2028, you're either gonna get an establishment type that's gonna have Larry Summers as his top economic advisor, or you're gonna pick a populist for the first time, someone like Bernie Sanders, and you're actually gonna do Democratic policies. That's gonna be the choice, and it'll determine which direction this entire country goes.
I just want to be clear. Are you saying Israel is pushing the president of the United States to cover up the Epstein files? And what evidence do you have that that is the case?
I simply just asked out loud, is there a foreign government? It could be any foreign government.
Well, you had AIPAC up there. It was pretty clear which government you were talking about.
That I'm questioning that government in particular and questioning any other foreign government.
She's like, what evidence might you have? Okay, first of all, we have all the evidence from Dropsite News that shows, yes, Israeli spies live with Jeffrey Epstein for different stretches at a time, for long stretches at a time. Ehud Barak came over 30 times. Ehud Barak couldn't get meetings with Vladimir Putin. He asked Epstein to do it. This is a former prime minister of Israel. Epstein goes, oh, don't worry, I'll look into it with my sources. And voila, he gets a meeting with Ehud Barak and Putin. He's what literally, you know who can do that? I don't know, is there 5 people, 10 people, 20 people in the world that have that kind of power? That means he's one of the most powerful men on earth. So the idea that he might be connected with a government is absurd. The idea that he is not connected with a government is absurd. And he's in the emails, Ehud Barak's emails, talking about, oh, let's try to get America to bomb Syria. Let's try to get America to bomb Iran. But I'm sure Dana Bash is gonna do a segment on that, right? I'm sure CNN is all over the airwaves talking about that, right? Is the reporting true or false? You know the reporting is true. That's why you're not doing a segment on it. Isn't it weird that they're purposely covering up a massive, fascinating story that solves the mystery of why Epstein was so powerful? And Dana, you can go and call it a trope and do whatever you want. And again, no one cares anymore, right? Oh, we canceled you already. We called it a trope, okay? I don't care what you called it. The Israeli lobby donates to 90% of Congress. Those folks vote with Israel 100% of the time. Prove me wrong. And so if that's true, which it is true, then does that entity, no matter what it is, by the way, there's several different entities that fit that bill. Big pharma, big oil, defense contractors, but yes, the Israeli lobby is one of them. And does the Israeli lobby totally control 90% of Congress? Obviously. No, how dare you say that? Well, completely true. You have been canceled in my mind because I find it to be a trope. Is there a trope about big pharma? Am I not allowed to say that? Am I being anti-pharmacist? I don't care what you think. I care about journalism. And it's obvious that Bash is not doing that. But to be fair, here she gave Marjorie Taylor Greene a forum. Marjorie Taylor Greene made her points and she appears to be completely correct. And Bash, as usual with her skepticism and huffing and puffing, is not correct. And so, by the way, if I'm misrepresenting her and I've read too much into her past context in this particular clip, I'm very happy to have a civilized conversation with Dana Bash. My guess is she's not happy to have that conversation, because if you have a conversation about Israel, you can't, because everyone in the conversation has already been canceled if they criticize Israel. And I'm sure that she'll be outraged by facts and journalism. Okay, well then you shouldn't call yourself a journalist. Yes, there's Democrats who are terribly guilty. Yes, there are potentially Republicans who are terribly guilty. And so the press keeps going, now remember, if you release it, you're both gonna get hurt. Like, who are you working for? What is this absurdity?
And it's even worse than that. The way they cover this story, I feel, intentionally pits American voters against one another, rather than focusing on how this is basically a conspiracy involving the most powerful people, not just in this country, but in the world.
Okay,
victimizing our children, victimizing minors. Like, that's what this story is about. So like, to me, I'm sorry, if you are still very much operating with the mindset of everything is partisan, that's all we care about, we have to protect our tribe, I'm sorry. I'm sure the way we cover this story upsets you. I don't care about partisanship right now, at all. I see a much bigger threat to this country, our democracy, our freedom, our sovereignty, than, is it the Democrats who are worse or the Republicans who are worse? There's garbage on both sides, we need to get them out.
Okay, two quick things about that. So in the stories that Dropsite News broke, Epstein arranges a meeting with Vladimir Putin and Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, could not arrange that meeting on his own. He needed Epstein to arrange it. On that fact alone, that shows you that Epstein was one of the most powerful people on earth. That's not a relevant story?
It's crazy.
Not a single mainstream media outlet has covered that? No, that's why what Tom Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ro Khanna did in pushing this forward was absolutely heroic. If there's ever any truth or justice in our history books, they will mark those three as absolute American heroes for defying all of Washington, all of their colleagues, and all of the media. Because all of them, and why are all of his colleagues and all their colleagues and the media, why were they all covering up for a pedophile? How does that make any sense at all? One of the worst criminals in American history, why are they all covering for him? Come on, guys, we all know the answer. We already know it, the stories have already been broken. It's because Epstein was working with Israel, and Washington, D.C. is 100% occupied by Israel, but the American people broke their luck today.
Yes.
It was amazing. You put so much pressure on them that all those people were constantly playing shell games, to Anna's point. Oh, we're not in charge? Okay, we want the files. Oh, we're in charge? We don't want the files, right? And all of a sudden, you guys put a stop to that.
I know.
And by the way, tremendous credit to the Trump voters who put pressure on their own representatives and broke them. Great job. A lot of people on the Democratic side are now making the case, well, look, there was an open case, Ghislaine Maxwell, when Biden was president. That's why Biden couldn't release the files. If there's an open case, you can't release the files. That is technically true. But let me ask all those people, where are all the prosecutions? If Obama, Biden, and all the Democrats were just angels, but oh God, golly gee, there's just this one open case, so there's nothing they could do. Well, what was stopping them from prosecuting all the other predators? They didn't prosecute a single one, they didn't open a single case, they didn't do a single thing to hold anyone accountable for those crimes. So please spare me this total and utter BS about how the Democrats would have done the right thing. Where's the prosecutions? No, they had every opportunity to do the right thing. They never took it, because this is not about Epstein. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is about a government actor that they are not telling you about. And if you say to me, hey, Jake, it's not Mossad, it's the CIA, and maybe they work together, sure. But it isn't no one. It isn't Epstein and Maxwell by themselves and magically protected by both parties nonstop. And the last thing, when it comes to Republicans, Alex Acosta is the one who gave him the sweetheart deal. He's a US attorney down in Miami. He pops up later, 8 years later, as the labor secretary for Trump. Labor secretary, when he was just a US attorney, that is so random. But you gotta reward the guy who gave the sweetheart deal to the worst pedophile in American history. Who's rewarding him? Who is making these decisions and then actively hiding it from everyone else? That's the most important question. And by the way, the question that mainstream media not only will not ask when they're supposed to be journalists and reporters, but actively hides by saying, if you ask that question, you're an anti-Semite, right? And your life should be, your career and life should be canceled for daring to ask the most obvious question there is.
That's right.
No one's talking about the 53% that Israel occupies. So they ethnically cleansed half of Gaza. Every time you ring the bell occupy it, an angel gets its wings. And they've totally not in the middle of flattening literally every building there, so they could rebuild it. Israeli condos there. So what are we going to do with that half of Gaza?
We know what's going to happen with that half of Gaza. That's why this is all a farce. This is why I want nothing more than to celebrate an actual peace plan that legitimately leads to a two-state solution. That's not what this is. That's very, very clear to me. And it's because of the same mind virus that infects President Trump on other issues, which is, how can I make money off of this? Jared Kushner salivating over that oceanfront property. You think this is all a mistake, like it's all an accident? No, the reason why Trump wants to be the chairman of this so-called peace board is because he wants to oversee the money-making opportunities for himself and his family.
Look, I just make billions. I don't care about your stupid corruption.
You're 80,
just get out of Gaza. Get the Israelis out of Gaza, and then if you want to build spectacular things for the Palestinians, amazing, great. And you want to make a killing off of it, I don't, just please leave them alone. Give them their own country. But Israel is blocking peace. It is, and in this, the reason the Russians and the Chinese abstain is because they're like, the Israelis say they won't leave. So what is this? This is nonsense, right? Okay, the Egyptians and the Turks and the Indonesians say, yeah, they'll do it and they'll participate, and I don't want you to keep slaughtering the Palestinians, so I'll just abstain. But we all know this is a joke, because the Israelis are never going to leave. This was always about taking land. And so, but our deeply corrupt media in this country never tells you any of that.
The other thing is, it really does look like the stabilization forces are going to be utilized to fight Hamas on behalf of the IDF instead of actually stabilizing for peace. And they're worried about that. So while they've volunteered, and while their public statements seem as though they're totally on board for this, there have been some internal discussions about their concerns that they're just going to be used and they're just going to sacrifice members of their own militaries in order to fight Hamas on behalf of Israel.
Yeah, and so I don't even have a problem with them fighting Hamas, and I love that they're trying to actually protect the Palestinians, and that's part of the point there, and I hope nothing goes wrong there. But basically what Israel and America are trying to trick them into doing is, why don't you be our cops for us and make sure those dirty Palestinians don't come into our new precious greater Israel, which we just stole from them, okay? So if they just turn into Israeli cops, then yeah, there's going to be unrest and violence, and it's going to turn into an absolute disaster. And then what will Israel say after that? Well, you see that we had the Muslims run it on their own, and it turned into a mess. I guess we're going to have to take the other half of Gaza. And so if you don't agree to that, you're an anti-Semite. So this is planned to explode on these well-meaning countries who are trying to protect the Palestinians. And America is aiding and abetting more of Israel's war crimes. So everybody, look, again, guys, if you live in America and you watch mainstream media, you have no idea how much of a tiny bubble you're in. The rest of the planet sees this perfectly clearly. You're the only ones who don't see it because you're being lied to by ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSN, MS Now, and Fox News, okay? And New York Times and Washington Post, they're all lying to you and pretending that Israel didn't take half of Gaza and that Israel didn't do this for land and Israel doesn't have a greater Israel plan, which is the whole point is steal Arab land, genocide, ethnic cleansing, doesn't matter, just take the land, and they did it. And American media lied to you and pretended that if you criticize that you hated Jews.
It's ridiculous. Anyway.
No, they're evil. Mainstream media is evil in their protection of genocide as long as Israel does it. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.